I'm a leader of a treatment facility, and we deal with children, and lots of these children are medicated. I just recently taking up this position, and I'm really worried about how to deal with these dilemmas around the medication. I gather it'd be a bad idea just to say, get off the medicines, It probably wouldn't help them, So.
Well, a lot of these people who refuse to come here, leading Danish psychiatrists, they should somehow taste a little of their own medicine, forced treatment, which in this case means to see the video.
Ooh, yes.
I don't think there's any more profound question out there right now. If you're medicating, even 3% is a lot. We're getting close to 15% of our kids are being medicated. The stimulants in some ways, I think, have the best profile of different classes of drugs in terms of kids. If you look at SSRIs, in terms of, they're not even really effective over the short term in youth. And the data around antipsychotics in kids is really, really problematic. One of the most moving experiences I had while reporting Anatomy of an Epidemic, I went to this place in California, near Oakland, which worked with the worst kids. By the worst kids, it's supposedly the most severely ill kids. They were designated as level 12++. So level 12 was the most severely ill kids. ++ meant no hospital wanted them, no foster care. They could not go anywhere. This was the last step. That residential facility was run by an extraordinary man named Tony Stanton, a psychiatrist. And since 1987, he had been taking all the kids arriving there off medication. And he did so with this thought. One, if they're level 12++, obviously it's not working. So we need to try something different. That was his first thought. His second thought, he says this: I don't ask what's wrong with the kid, I ask what's happened to the child. And he would spend like 12 hours, 15 hours building a life story of that child. And every child generally had a horrible life story. I mean, these were like, impoverished kids, abused kids, etc. And I spent a couple days there, and I asked the staff, I said, well, what are they like when they come in? These are heavily medicated kids. Well, they can't even keep their head off the table. That's how heavily medicated they are. And I said, well, what happens when you take them off the meds? I said, for a while, well, the first thing, they all said the exact same thing. What do you think every staff member said about the change in behavior in the kids? They all had one line: they come alive again. That's what I heard over and over again. They came alive again. In terms of behavior, there was there was a lot of difficult behavior, especially initially. But what Tony Stanton believed was that no human being, no child, can organize their behavior except in relationship to another human being. You can't organize your behavior by yourself. So what he believed is they needed mentors and people they wanted to impress. So he had a lot of young, hip staff members, like who were 18, or really more like 20, 21, 22. And the whole point was, the therapy was, those kids would learn to want to get the affection of those 20 and 21 years and 22-year-olds. Anyway, that form of care was enormously successful. Without almost exception, the kids left with much better behavior. I don't want to make it sound like they were, everything was fine, but they went down on this grading level. When I got there, by the way, the kids who'd been there 6 months had just come back from a trip to Disneyland. So, to my mind, that was an example of a societal response where they really were putting some time and effort into those kids. And what they were showing, and have been showing for 20-some years, is there were other ways to manage the most disturbed children. Now, the bad part of this is, after my book, that program was shut down. Oh. Because what happens is, and Tony left, is certain people complained is those kids, because they were being taken off medication, were not getting the standard of care. They were being denied good medical care. And it didn't matter that they were doing better. And so they shut it down. And that was the last residential program I know of that took the most disturbed kids, and as a matter of course, took them off medications. And by the way, most of them came in, they were on 7, 8, 3, 4 antipsychotics. Anyway, that's very long-winded, sorry. But I think you're in a very difficult spot.
I just want to say that for many years in the place where I work, in Gothenburg, we have had this issue on the agenda. And when it's children and young people, also to inform their parents about the figures and the research we have been presented today. And so far, that is, I would like to say it's absolutely possible. It's not easy, but it's possible and it's absolutely worth it. I just want to say that.
It's obvious that when you are coming to a place like this and you meet some kind of 100 saved souls already, it's easy for us to appreciate what you're saying. And the problem is when Peter is coming to a place and he's not a psychiatrist, so he doesn't get really appreciated from the psychiatrist. The way you are performing and telling about your facts, it's very much, which I really appreciate, the facts about the pharmacology. And this is research that you are talking about is the research about the brain and so on. Do you ever think, because I know that you're very happy about the Lapland model, do you think that the things that are happening to people who doesn't take medication anymore, what is the alternative to the medication? I mean, we work in lots of people here with therapy, and like Christian has said, and Gothenburg as well. But I think we need research also what's happening to the other part, the psychosocial treatment.
In my opinion, there's been an absolute dearth of research in terms of how best to get off medications. One of the points is so often these are just studies where they withdraw it, but they don't provide other support. So there's really no information on like what other types of things might help people, the timing of how slow, how fast. You can go on the internet and there's user groups that are sharing a lot of information about how they did it, and they'll talk about yoga, diet, exercise. They'll also talk about the need for social support, because often withdrawal is very difficult. In other words, during those dark times, having someone to go to. I think the problem here is really profound in this sense. We have a system that opens the door for people going on medication, but the system hasn't built an exit door for going off. And unfortunately, it's being left up to the patients. I'd like to see research into this and really try to figure out the very questions you're asking.
About not being a psychiatrist, Charles Darwin was neither a biologist nor a geologist. And yet he contributed more than most researchers can ever hope for. It is an argument that I have described earlier, and I call it the "you are not one of us" argument, which primitive people have used at all times.
My work for the last 5 years has been supporting people trying to taper off drugs. What we can see is that a lot of people in different institutions get a huge amount of medication with serious interactions, side effects and everything. And there is good evidence that tapering off these drugs will improve overall conditions for people living in different kinds of institutions.
When you talk about long-term damage to the brain, do you have any idea about how many years or how long time do you have to take medication for it to be irreversible damage? And I'd also like to emphasize that it's very important to give an alternative, because I think the problem is that it's very cheap to give people drugs. And the alternative is psychotherapy, for instance, or like in Finland, to work with the network around the people, and it takes a lot more time and a lot more money. But if you can gather information that this is the way to do it, it will be easier to emphasize this. So,
About psychotherapy, it's often used as an excuse for using drugs because there are waiting lists for psychologists and things like that. And it's a very bad excuse. You should not use drugs if you think they will do more harm than good, which a lot of these drugs actually will do in such a situation. Second, it's not even an excuse. There are many studies that have compared professional psychotherapists with amateurs, lay people, and they have shown very disturbingly to the professionals that ordinary people can have, or actually they get equally good results as people with a psychotherapeutic education. All it takes is to have an interest in fellow human beings and listen to them and take them seriously and be warm and loving and have some empathy, and you can produce remarkable results.
I was just going to answer real quickly your question about what is long-term and, like, let's say the brain shrinkage and that sort of thing. We don't know, because again, it shows the lack of research into this. But it seems to be quite variable. That's number one. So if you look at tardive dyskinesia, it's 5% per year, at least it used to be in the United States, which shows different vulnerabilities to this sort of the toxic effects. That's one. Two, youth, for example, have higher TD rates after 1 year than adults, but it seems to be reversible often in youth, which shows the sort of the capacity of the younger brain to heal itself. So my answer to you is this. There's so many unanswered questions related to long-term use. The data, it suggests that it's quite variable. But if we're going to be putting 10-15% of our population on these medications, and for longer term, these are the very questions we need to answer.
My name is Susanne. I am also a politician, and I'm also a member of the psychiatry committee. I'm speaking also as a representative of a former use of the system, and having been drugged and drugged and drugged myself. Society as it is today is heavily controlling people's behaviors and is having a norm of what is normal behavior. So people who do not act according to what is considered normal behavior are punished or treated. So one thing is the terror of showing emotions in society. It's considered a disease instead of a healing factor. The other thing is that you should not be seen as a case. You should be seen as a complete human being, and this is where the peer comes into place. If you are both seen as someone who can give and needs attention, then you are not put in a position either of the giver or the taker, but you are seen as a full human being. And I have been teaching and using methods like this for many years and with good results, and I have been off drugs for more than 30 years. I've never missed them.
I always get very emotional, actually, when I hear about all these statistics and these numbers and the horror of, for me, I think the horror of psychiatric treatment. I myself have been given up schizophrenic on maximum dosage, and I've been left dribbling in the corner for 10 years. I escaped, and I've decided to become a psychologist after that experience. But what I'd like to actually ask really is, since we are here, and there are the psychiatrists refuse to come, which, as I've just written on my Facebook, shame on them. I'm curious, because now that in America, for example, they've given up on the idea of the myths actually. And in Denmark, only just now, this year, after Peter Gøtzsche wrote his article in the Politiken on the 10 myths, that we're now beginning